Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6:30, and I'd like to call tonight's regular council meeting to order. We acknowledge with respect that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and we are honored to have this opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of Songhees and Esquimalt nations, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Going on to the agenda, there are two amendments that I'm going to make to the agenda. The first one being item 10.2 has been removed from new business by the request of Councillor Jordison. That's the motion regarding sidewalks on Ben Homer and Owens Road. And the second amendment being item number under new business 10.1. There was an error under the Planning and Land Use Committee. There's actually two councillors that are appointed to that particular committee, and they're both Councillor Ward and Councillor Jensen, with Councillor Ward being the chair of the committee. And on that note, the new motion for approval of the agenda will be as follows: that the near and long-term agenda be received, and that the agenda of the regular council meeting of February 27th, 2023 be adopted as amended. May I get a mover and seconder for the adoption of tonight's agenda as amended? Councillor Grove and Councillor Olson. Discussion? Councillor Day.
Thank you. You mentioned that Councillor Jensen and Councillor Ward will be on the Planning and Land Use Committee. Is there not also an alternate then?
It's a good one. I have to consider that one.
Okay,
Thank you. Great point. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? It's unanimous. And release of in-camera resolutions. This afternoon, council had an in-camera council meeting at 2 p.m. Citizen appointments to the committees were considered, and specific appointments will be announced at the next regular meeting of council once the applicants have been notified. Moving on, my mayor's messages. I have a few messages for everyone. I think if you go down to Royal Bay, you'll see a big giant sign there, the quality food sign. That's at the Royal Bay's Commons. It's a sign of some good things to come, and we'll start seeing a lot of the new businesses opening up this spring and the summer. Second item is the neighborhood sign installation. It begins this week. Start looking for the new signs welcoming people to Colwood neighborhoods. It's one small way to help people navigate and celebrate Colwood's unique neighborhoods and foster community pride. This funding is coming from the federal government. The third item is that grant funding has been approved for the active transportation counters. That's going to provide a lot of valuable data to inform active transportation plans and encourage more people to walk, wheel, cycle in Colwood. I'd like to also acknowledge and thank the members of Colwood Council who participated in the coldest night of the year walk on Saturday. Councillors Grove, Councillor Jensen, and Councillor Ward. They really showed great support of people in need for our community, and along with our wonderful partners at the Pacific Center Family Services Association and Our Place. And lastly, I got to do a shout out here for our Colwood firefighters who conquered the Stair Climb BC Challenge over the weekend to raise funds for the BC Lung Association. Chief Brian Irwin climbed 48 flights of stairs wearing full protective equipment in 9 minutes and 6 seconds. It just cost me $100. I said if he can do it under 10 minutes, I'd give him $100 for his charity. I was going to give it to him regardless. But six other Colwood firefighters also rose to the challenge as well. So well done to Colwood's firefighters. Really well done. Adoption of the minutes May I get a motion to adopt the regular council meeting minutes from February 13th? Councillor Grove, Councillor Jensen, are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor of adoption? Unanimous. Public participation. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I do believe we have one by telephone, right? One or two?
We actually have two, but one keeps falling off. So you could just ask Gabrielle to announce one at a time and hopefully he can get back online.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Gabrielle, could you let the first person in?
Yep, Carol Brown, if you press *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, I did press it. Thank you.
And just a reminder to those that are participating in public participation that comments pertaining to following matters that have been subject to public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. Bylaw 1930-13 CD 33 2350 Souk Road. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Citizens Environment Network in Colwood, CENIC, wishes to encourage Council to vote in support of the District of Metchosin's resolution aimed at reducing the number of bulk freighter anchorings outside of the Port of Vancouver. There are 5 anchorages designated off Royal Roads and 5 at Constance Bank off Metchosin. The bulk freighters waiting for coal and grain can spend weeks here producing 10 tons of greenhouse gases daily while dragging 400-meter-long anchor chains weighing up to 30 tons across our marine seabeds. This dragging with wind and currents scours our marine ecosystems. While anchored, they disperse acidic, toxic sludge into the ocean from the scrubbers that clean their heavy fuels. This sludge dumping is allowed here by Transport Canada, yet not allowed in the Port of Vancouver. Underwater noises from the bulk freighters can be 40% as loud as a ship that is in transit, and this noise harms our marine life. The freighter that caught fire November 2021, the Zim Kingston, was sent to Constance Bank as it is designated as an area for ships in distress.
30
The
seconds.
runoff from the firefighting was acknowledged to be toxic to marine life. Bulk carrier anchorages in the South Gulf Islands have increased to 498 in 2020 from only 23 in 2009. CENIC asks Council to consider the importance of support for the District of Metchosin's resolution and the taking of the resolution to the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities and the Union of BC Municipalities for their support. Thank you so much. May I also just say that I live on Triangle Mountain, and I just want to put a shout out tonight to the wonderful Colwood road maintenance crew. We are up here and it's been really snowing off and on, and they've done a wonderful job. So just a shout out to them.
We always love the compliments. Okay, thank you very much. Gabrielle, did you manage to get the other person online?
They haven't come back online, sorry, no.
Okay, we can always come back to it then. So the item 7 is delegations. The first delegation is from the Community Social Planning Council of Greater Victoria. I'd just like to take two seconds out to introduce Diane Gibson, who is the Executive Director, and Colton Whitaker, Communications Coordinator of the Community Social Planning Council. So over to you. Just have to press the button there so when the red light comes on.
Is that good there? Perfect. Alrighty. Hi, everyone. My name is Colton Whitaker. I'm the Communications Coordinator for the Community Social Planning Council. I'm joined alongside with Diana Gibson, the Executive Director of the Planning Council. I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to hear our presentation. And our goal today is to highlight what we do here at the Planning Council and to keep a lot of important conversations going. So I think I can control. There we go. So who are we? We are a Victoria-based nonprofit that has been in existence since 1936. Our goal is to help build thriving and sustainable communities for everyone. We work to accomplish this by addressing community issues, increasing dialogue, and finding solutions. As we grapple with compounding issues such as unaffordability, climate change, social injustice, we are committed to collaborating with stakeholders in order to achieve a more just and inclusive society. We have four main focus areas at the CSPC. The first being housing affordability. In this space right now, we currently are preparing for the point in time count that is occurring on March 8th. The point in time count is a survey that is done every couple of years. Through this survey, we collect data on the demographics, history, service needs of those experiencing homelessness in order to help guide decision makers, planners, and service providers. In the realm of economic justice, and one of our most notable pieces of work every year is the annual living wage report. This is where we calculate the actual costs for a family of four to live in Greater Victoria. Just in 2022, the living wage spiked 20% in 1 year, which is the largest increase that we've seen in 20 years of calculating this. And the living wage for 2022 in Greater Victoria was $24.29. In the community innovation space, we offer evidence-based consulting to other nonprofits and municipalities through studies, safety and well-being plans, and much more. We are currently working with the City of Colwood on a prosperity report, and we're super excited to showcase the City of Colwood in this report. And lastly, in the climate equity space, we do a lot of work around equity to do with the climate. So we have an e-bike program that we partnered with Saanich on. We also have developed infographics to help keep people safe during extreme heat events. And we're working on sharing best practices throughout the region. With that in mind, I'll pass it on to Diana to continue.
Thank you so much, Colton. Mayor and Council, thank you so much for having us today. Our partnership with Colwood goes back a long ways, and some of you have seen us here for presentations in the past. But it's always an evolving conversation because the issues facing the region change. And last time we talked, really, it was looking at housing affordability. But as Colton mentioned, cost of living has become a real concern for households. So household prosperity is really an area of focus for us. And I think for folks here, I know in terms of businesses being able to attract and retain staff and have a vibrant local community, it's not just housing affordability, but it's food and fuel and transportation. So that brings us to the Household Prosperity Project that actually Colwood started this project with SIPs a few years back, and last year we joined as that partnership as the lead organization helping to support the Household Prosperity Project. Colwood led it with UBCM funding and got partners Victoria and Saanich to come to the table as formal partners on the project. And it was to work at the staff level, sharing learnings, and then having the Planning Council support them with capacity around research and data. So this project brings extra funding to Colwood and the partner municipalities and capacity from us at the Social Planning Council to support research, best practices around housing affordability and prosperity. And other community partners have wanted to come on board. So Oak Bay joined, Esquimalt and Langford have come to the table as well because they wanted to be part of this conversation. So Colwood started it, Victoria and Saanich joined, and now everybody wants to be part of it. So it's really great to see this kind of momentum coming with Colwood's leadership. And there's where the compliment can come, to a shout out to Colwood for stepping into the space and showing some leadership. Some of you might have joined us at the first counselor learning session that was done as part of this project. We developed a housing levers toolkit for answering the question for new councils of what can city councils do on housing affordability and household prosperity. And so we started to develop a toolkit that we've been workshopping as part of this project that's being shared with partner municipalities. And we workshopped it at that first learning session on December 5th. And I know some of you couldn't participate because you were at work that day. And we've organized a second session March 6th that I'm hoping more of you will be able to attend to dig in on the toolkit. Some of the things we've been doing as part of that housing affordability and prosperity project include webinars, the housing toolkit, fact sheets, backgrounders, sharing best practices. So if the city staff at the table are asking, you know, I heard somebody's doing this great thing in Kelowna or in Montreal, can we learn a little bit more about it? Then we'll bring some of those resources to the conversation as the sort of research support. And so that's, as I said, that was funded as a one-year project by the Union of BC Municipalities last year. And there's an initiative to move into another year of funding for that, which will be coming back to you guys for endorsement with broader, like I said, with broader participation, because now Langford, Oak Bay, and Esquimalt all have motions going forward to support Colwood as the lead municipality. So they would love to see Colwood continue this initiative. And then the other piece, Colwood was again part of, Colwood was at the table with City of Victoria, the CRD, and a few foundations in early 2020 when the pandemic was unfolding, and saw households at risk of eviction, a whole lot of households going into arrears on their rent that were going to be evicted. And so Colwood was one of the municipalities that pushed for a rent bank to start across Greater Victoria. And the Social Planning Council stepped in to help operationalize that, and we continue to be the lead regionally, but it's a broad collaboration. Colwood still sits as an advisor with Victoria, the CRD, the United Way, and then a lot of housing providers, Landlord BC, some of the bigger landlords, Devon and Brown Brothers, and some of the others that sit as an initiative to help prevent households from being evicted that are going through a crisis. So it's different from some of the other housing grants programs because it's not for ongoing gaps between income and rent. It's for people who are having a crisis, because we saw in that point in time survey, many of the households out on the street, individuals in homelessness, are there because of a crisis, a health crisis, a divorce, a death in the family, a loss of a job, a workplace injury. And if we can bridge them through those crises, we can keep them from getting into homelessness. And it's far cheaper to support that household through the crisis than to try and get them back into homelessness if they are into housing after they've been homeless. So we run this program and we're working with our regional partners to build more sustaining funding, because the province funds it, but not fully. They want to see other levels of government do matching funding. So that'll be also something that'll be coming to the board. And we did engage with over 2,000 households across the region that were at risk of eviction, 258 which got loans and 320 of which got grants, and the balance of which were helped to access other services and programs they could get. And then some of the other things we do at the Social Planning Councils, we help people who have had their ID lost or stolen. And this is one of the gateways for people to get out of homelessness or into employment. If you don't have ID, you can't get housing, you can't get employment, you can't get income assistance. Over 30% of the people coming through that program are Indigenous. So of course, this is making a huge difference. Over 500 people have been served.
1 minute warning.
And then we also have a transit assistance program where we help people with low income access passes and tickets for transit. So that we address, and this is where if people who are in low income can get free access to transit, we can continue to support transit with broader fees. And then Colton mentioned our climate equity program. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Diane. Questions from council? I just have a simple question here, Diane. I know most of your funding comes from the provincial government. I believe you said correct. And so And right now they're telling you to go get it from municipal government now. Is that the case?
That program has always been a cost share program. It's actually funded through Van City Community Foundation with a grant, an endowment that they gave for the rent bank program. But it was they said that they would hope that they wouldn't pay the full cost of that. So it's always been a cost share. In the first year, it was United Way, City of Victoria, and some of the strategic plan grants from around the region. And that last year, the City of Victoria gave 110,000, and Colwood has been a partner from the beginning. So I think Oak Bay gave some money, and Saanich and Langford and Esquimalt are all considering funding as well. So it's a portion of it that the province would like to see just for that rent bank program.
Okay, so second question I have, you probably don't keep this stat, but do you of all the numbers that you're presenting there, do you track where that's like who's using that? Like it's West Shore people, Victoria people. So do you have those stats?
Yeah, 21% of that 2,000 and of each of those groups that were funded comes from Colwood. So Colwood and Langford, City of Victoria has the highest, and then Colwood and Langford are the next highest for participation in the rent bank.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Sorry, that it's Saanich and Langford that are 21%. Colwood is 6%. Sorry.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, I know the numbers are in my
I was
head.
like, wow, that's a big number.
I think I'm sorry. So Colwood is closer to 6%. Iain is presenting, I think something you guys have a backgrounder for this, the next topic when the rent bank comes up. Yeah, Colwood's a much smaller portion. Thanks.
Thank you. There's another question here for Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to know this obviously is being broadcast to our community. So if people find themselves in that situation where they have that unexpected event, where do they go to find you?
Yeah, our email is, our website is communitycouncil.ca, and there's a drop down in our services for rent bank. You can also just phone our office. The number's on our website, communitycouncil.ca. If somebody's experiencing a personal crisis and at risk of eviction, our team's always available to help. If you aren't able to access our service, they'll certainly help you access any other services that you'll be eligible for in the region.
That's awesome, because I certainly have heard from even employees in local businesses who, maybe they made a bad choice. Instead of paying their hydro bill, they paid off their credit card because they were worried about it. And then surprise, surprise, that really comes back to bite them. Not only are they short of money to pay all their bills, but now they're also facing eviction. So I have seen that that's a reality in our municipality.
And so our folks will work with talking to the landlords and helping to negotiate interim payments and settlements and help folks to avoid eviction, some landlord guarantee funds. And it's a no interest loan, and it's a long-term flexible repayment program so that people aren't put into hardship as they try and make these payments. And we can really help the households level out their income and manage their debt. We'll also help with financial planning, credit management, and all sorts of other programs. So
one of those great places out there when you don't know what to do, here's a good place to ask.
Yeah, our team, we've got some great staff members, a team of social work and other trained folks that are ready to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you do in the community.
Thank you for supporting us.
Okay, the next delegation is the Greater Victoria Green Team. And I have Caitlin Warren, Interim Program Manager, and it says Maria Varum, sorry, the Program Coordinator of the Greater Victoria Green Team. You have 10 minutes. Over to you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So my name is Maria Varum. I'm the Program Coordinator for the Greater Victoria Green Team.
My name is Caitlin Warren. I'm the Interim Program Manager.
And we wanted to thank you all so much for having us here tonight to be able to talk to you about how the Greater Victoria Green Team and the City of Colwood have been working together over the years to improve health and well-being in the community through environmental stewardship.
So the Greater Victoria Green Team is a program of the charity Green Teams of Canada. The Greater Victoria program started in 2014, and we've been working in the city of Colwood since 2016. This charity was founded on the basis that people really need something to bring them together and something to do outdoors. So we bring people together to participate in hands-on environmental stewardship activities that really helps to empower and increase responsibility and a sense of connection. So we seek to have healthy communication, healthy communities engaged in environmental stewardship. In the city of Colwood, we began a formalized partnership through the Community Investment Partnership model in 2018. And since then, we have had the opportunity to expand our partnership, and we've been running more and more activities each year, and we hope to continue to do so. So these photos on the screen show a wide diversity of types of activities that we've run. We've run activities with elementary school and secondary school students, as well as a wide variety of community members.
So in the past year, in 2022, a major focus of our activities was invasive species removal, in particular with specific schools. And this is a really, really popular program with a lot of teachers and with students. In October in particular, we were running an activity at Lagoon West Park, removing invasive blackberry, and everyone was just having so much fun. I had a student come up to me and tell me that this was the best day of school of the whole year. And I was like, it is only October. You have the whole year ahead of you. And he was very adamant that this was nothing could top this for the rest of the year until June. So very, very popular with the students, also very popular with the teachers. There's a very high demand. When we put a call out for these events, we get sometimes more teachers than we have the capacity to accommodate, emailing us back wanting to participate because they really understand, they get it. They see the impact that this has on bringing the kids outside and getting them to work together towards a common goal, getting them outside to connect with nature. So it's really great to see. Of course, we also run activities on weekends, just open to any community members. Actually, in fact, I believe 3 of you have been to activities in the past few months with Colwood, which is really fantastic. So these activities are super great. They bring together anybody, really. They're open to anyone of all ages, all backgrounds, all experience levels. So it's a fantastic opportunity for people from different groups, whether you've got families with young kids or seniors or high school students or people who've just moved to town. They can all connect with each other and connect these different groups that might not have met otherwise. There's a lot of support from community members in general, including Colwood residents. They're really happy to see that the city of Colwood is supporting the Green Team, which is great. Our volunteers tell us how much they love spending time outside, getting fresh air, and doing something tangible to impact their community and help the environment.
So through all of these wonderful community engagement activities, we've had a really impactful change through a wide variety of Colwood parks. For example, this photo shows a before shot and an after shot at Ocean View Park. And you can see the trees that have been saved from ivy. Overall, last year, we were able to remove 124 cubic meters of invasive plants, and we were able to revitalize more than 1,600 square meters of habitat. This photo is from Perimeter Park, and as you can see, there is just full of invasive Himalayan blackberry. And that is after just 3 hours of community volunteerism. So I'll show that again. Look at that. It's pretty incredible. And so this impact really empowers people and allows them to feel that they are having a real impact on their community and that they are making real change. And it is a really wonderful thing to see. So we have introduced more than 80% of our participants to the Colwood parks for the very first time. So we're increasing exposure to these parks as well as increasing environmental stewardship because more than 80% of participants were doing invasive species removal for the very first time through these activities. So it's a really wonderful gateway to bring people in and introduce them to different activities that they can do and meet different people. We have connected with almost 400 people just last year, and we worked with 3 different schools, Wishart Elementary, Dunsmuir Middle School, and Royal Bay Secondary.
So we've had this partnership with Colwood for a very long time, as we said, and we've experienced a lot of benefits and seen a lot of benefits for the city of Colwood as well. One of the main ones being that the Greater Victoria Green Team has been able to help Colwood meet its official community plan goals around environmental stewardship, creating vibrant communities, and creating communities that are resilient to change. We do this through increasing the community engagement and education at the activities that we run. And of course, we improve the local biodiversity of the local parks to help make them more adaptable and more resilient in the face of a changing climate. Some of the other benefits include an increase in awareness about Colwood parks. Like Caitlin was just saying, we introduce a lot of people to parks for the very first time. We also are able to spread awareness through our social media and through getting articles in newspapers and things like that. Another major benefit for Colwood is that it adds capacity for Colwood Park staff. They're able to take on kind of more projects or bigger projects because they know that the Green Team is going to be bringing in a lot of volunteers to contribute a lot of volunteer hours. And those volunteer hours are extremely cost effective, and there's a really great value for the services that we are able to provide for Colwood. So we are really grateful for this partnership that we've had over the years, and we are so excited to see where it goes into the future.
So we are looking into this year and the next following years. We want to run even more activities with Colwood. Last year we ran 7 activities, and we are hoping to increase the number every year. And we want to expand our reach into more parks. As talking with park staff, there are more parks that could use some environmental remediation work. And we would like to run different types of activities because a lot of the parks we've done a lot of invasive species removal, and it would be great to plant some native plants back into those parks and continue the restoration work. And we hope to work with more schools and more teachers as the demand has been extremely high.
We also, because Colwood has been such a fantastic partner for so many years, we are open to exploring other ways of expanding the partnership. So that could look like taking on bigger projects spanning multiple years, things with a specific long-term restoration plan. It could even look like taking on joint projects with other municipalities. We do have other partnerships with some of the municipalities in the West Shore. So really we're open to explore. We are happy to see, whatever the city of Colwood is interested in tackling, we are interested in helping figure out how we can get that done.
Mm-hmm. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we just need to focus on this partnership and expanding it even further. So we have submitted a proposal, and if you have any questions about that proposal, we would love to answer them. And if you have any questions about the Greater Victoria Green Team in general, our information is on the screen if you have questions later, but we welcome your questions now.
Thank you very much. And the work you do in Colwood is absolutely amazing. I am so impressed. And I'll help, but as long as I don't do broom, because broom will kill me. I have to take an EpiPen around me, but I know some members of council. I remember seeing Councillor Grove all cut up, and it looked like your wife beat you up or something. It looked pretty bad. And Councillor Ward, and I know Councillor Jensen has participated in these in the past, but what you do is just absolutely phenomenal. I'll turn it over to Councillor Ward.
I just echo what you said, Mr. Mayor. Caitlin, Maria, thank you very much for presenting. Obviously, I've only been out once, I confess, but I monitor the emails that come in and see the opportunities that come up throughout Greater Victoria. And what struck me is lately it seems that if you want to take part in the Green Team, you've got to act pretty quick. They're filling up. There's waiting. The second email is there's now a wait list. Whoa! So. As time permits, I'm really looking forward to participating in the next event in Colwood. But you really piqued my interest when you talked about, eventually expanding the program, the partnership, and some of the things that we can do together. So I'm excited about the opportunity there. I don't want to speak for Gord in our Parks Department, but I know he spoke very highly of you when I chatted briefly with him about it. And I think so, you know, everyone's a raving fan, and I look forward to continuing the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, going to move on to item number 8, correspondence requiring council direction. I think in your package, it's pretty self-explanatory. We received a letter from the District of Metchosin. It's a letter that they sent to the AVIC, or the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities. It's a resolution for reducing anchorages outside the Port of Vancouver. The recommendation is, in fact, that the City of Colwood send a letter of support to the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities for the resolution submitted by the District of Metchosin for reducing anchorages outside the Port of Vancouver. And if I can get a mover and seconder, and then we can discuss. Councillor Ward and Councillor Grove seconds. Is there any discussions, questions? Councillor Jensen.
Thank you. A well-written letter, and kudos to the community of Metchosin, and I am happy to endorse it to move it forward. The only questions I had, and I don't think it's clear to me here. I mean, we've had people in chambers here speak about supply chain issues. Now, my understanding, this is fairly specific, I guess, to bulk carriers, which is a lot of coal and a lot of grain leaving Roberts Bank. So, I mean, typically we're not importing coal, I guess, so that's not an issue. But is there any clarity on that? Like, does this include container ships and stuff like that as well? Or is this just people waiting for the bulk? I don't know if anyone knows anything more than I.
Looks like Councillor Grove, or no, Councillor Day knows the answer to that one. Councillor Day.
Sorry, no, I don't know the answer to that, but there are members in our community who may, I'm not sure if he's retired yet, but those anchorages are controlled, and there is a ministry that's responsible. But regardless of that, my comments are really focused around the environmental damage that's occurring under the water, where most of us don't think about it too much, but all of our environment is under pressure. So whether there's supply chain issues or not, we still have to get it figured out so that while we're doing the business of the day, we do no harm.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Grove.
Yeah, thanks. I can answer. It is all ships. They're waiting to get their load in line. However, when I was approached by Metchosin Councillor to discuss this and encourage this to happen, they made it clear that in Adelaide, Australia, for instance, the ships up to 2 weeks, 15 days before they arrive in the port, they get into a line. And this is possible now because of GPS and communications, etc. They get in line and they slow way down. So they travel at a much slower, reduced speed, so that when they don't arrive to unload until their load is ready to be put back on board to leave, which reduces the need for this lineup a significant amount. While they're slowed down that 2 weeks, they're actually traveling more efficiently as well. It's just the nature of the physics of that. But all ships are included. It just so happens that most of the stuff coming through is the bulk carriers, and the container ships don't have the same backlog issues, I guess. But the other thing I'd wanted to mention is just that, you know, to support this, I of course would do it, but one of the at the very least, because we don't know how far this can go because of the federal overlay and provincial overlay of how this all works. The pressure, it's a good thing to put through, but at the very least, we show support for our neighboring municipality.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grove. Councillor Jensen again.
Sorry, I didn't really have much to say. That was just a thought that occurred to me, is I'd hate to see us have an impact on the supply chain. And I do believe it is an issue, Councillor Day, because we are still playing catch up after COVID in many sectors of the economy, which I do think is relevant to us in our community. And I hate to think that we have a negative impact on that, but I'm sure we can rely on our brothers and sisters and other councils and the UBCM to manage that. So I am happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, I am gonna call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 9, unfinished business. There is no unfinished business. We got through the budget on February 24th. Thank you very much to council. That was a lot of work, a lot of hard work. New business, item 10.1, council appointments to advisory committees. Someone want to move the motion? And the only difference there is the one for planning and land use, which should read that Councillor Ward and Councillor Jensen be appointed to the planning and land use committee, and Councillor Ward be appointed as chair. And the rest are as read there. I should also point out right now, there's going to be more balance in this right now. This is only the start of the committees. There's a potential of 6 more committees, and they are going to happen from what I can see right now from the feedback. They want a committee for every one of them. And then poor Councillor Day is going to end up wearing a couple of them. That's for darn sure. Anyways, I was wondering if I can get a motion on the recommendation. Oh, Councillor Jensen, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Ward. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Unanimous. 10.2 is canceled. The new 10.2 is Mr. Bourhill, Director of Community Planning. You're here to talk about funding requests for the Colwood Rent Bank.
Thank you, Worship. So as was presented to earlier this evening by representatives of the Community Social Planning Council, the City of Colwood has an opportunity to support the rent bank program. So our support to date has come in kind, staff support of the setting up and oversight for the program. As was already stated, the service provides no interest repayable loans to households at risk of eviction due to rent or essential utilities. Rent payments are paid directly to landlords. So in 2022, rent bank caseworkers helped over 2,000 households across the region that were facing potential eviction, and 258 of which received direct financial assistance under the program. Those who accessed the rent bank last year were predominantly female, and approximately 45% came from households with children. As noted in the staff report, the city's housing needs assessment suggests that the rent bank offers a unique way to target and support segments of our population that need the help the most, especially lone parent renter households. It also offers support to renters of secondary units like secondary suites, which is very important for Colwood. I'll just, it's in the staff report, but I wanted to make specific reference to a section of OCP that really, I think, supports Colwood getting more deeply involved in the rent bank program. So under section 9221, non-market rental housing, the Fish Community Plan calls upon the city to seek partnerships with nonprofit agencies and other levels of government to access housing programs directed towards specific populations such as Indigenous people, seniors, families with children, people with special needs, and those at risk of homelessness. So I think this opportunity before council tonight really does speak to what the Fish Community Plan is suggesting happens. So lastly, I'll read the recommendation that council consider approving the Community Social Planning Council's request to assign $30,000 a year in the 2023 to 2027 financial plan to be funded from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund to support the Colwood Rent Bank program. And that the Community Social Planning Council be requested to provide annual reports on the performance of the Colwood Rent Bank program prior to the following year's annual budget deliberations. I'll just note that staff are recommending that the cost of this contribution come from Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. So as council aware, that's a developer funded reserve fund, the balance of which currently sits at approximately $1.5 million. That concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. What a great presentation and what a great use of these funds that we do squirrel away year over year for situations like this. I think the part that I find the most appealing is that if there are different levels of government that support those who are in critical need that perhaps are living on the streets. This is kind of just a little step above that, where those who actually have acquired housing, but it might be having a difficult time maintaining it. And I just love that it's a bit of a niche application of the funds. And I think such a worthy endeavor. I think we were all starving students at one point or another. And my mom used to bring me care packages, and I lived off those, and ketchup sandwiches were not a stretch. So, I mean, I think we've all lived through some periods in our life where something like this would have been great. So I am happy to move the staff recommendation, your worship, and
I'll get you to hold on one. I'll just get some questions answered, and then I'll come back to you. Just circle back to you. Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I too am very supportive of this. I do know of some situations that I learned of far too late to help the people who are having issues, but especially that single lone parent in a rental situation that can become really impactful. And when you don't think there's anyone to reach out to, or that reaching out may expose your situation, that can be very difficult. Someone that I knew working in a local business revealed to me that as a kid, they were homeless, lived in their car, and nobody knew because it was too painful socially to tell other people the situation they were in. So I'm very, very supportive. But I would like to understand what other communities are adding to this, and the money that we provide, does that strictly go to people in Colwood who are doing this, accessing this fund?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Dan, through his worship. So as was presented, there was between 5 and 6% of the recipient households that came from Colwood last year. The hope is that by branding it a Colwood Rent Bank and really using the city's social media and other media channels, that we can get the word out to Colwood renters. As I said, it is available to people who are living in secondary suites, accessory dwelling units, not just conventional purpose-built rental. So that's important because of the sizable amount of our rental stock that is part of the secondary market. We are proposing that it come from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. That comes with some strings as it relates to how the money is used. Our hope is that the majority of it would go towards directly supporting renters in Colwood. However, we are just working on the details as to how the reserve fund requirements would dictate that, and would be proposing that we leave some flexibility to the Social Planning Council as to how the money is managed as part of the program. With respect to other contributions, I might ask if Anna could speak to that.
Hi, thank you for your questions and a curiosity. The we do track the postal codes of anybody coming into the program, so we can see who we're supporting and ensure that we're targeting funds appropriately and track and report out on that. So that'll give you the transparency and accountability that you'll want to have on how the funds are managed. And we have the ability to direct those funds towards individuals in a particular municipality. And in terms of how the other municipalities are participating, we are asking folks to do sort of proportionate shares. So some, as I mentioned, Saanich and Langford are a higher portion, and as is Victoria. So they've been requested to provide proportionately higher funding to the program. The motions are sitting before going towards their councils right now as well. So we don't have confirmation of funding. I can say that in year one, the only municipal funder was Victoria at 24,000. In year two, it was at 110,000. And that included a program for grants as well as loans. They provided some operating funding, some loan funding, and then they also gave us an additional funding envelope for loan forgiveness for households that were really struggling to make payments, where it made sense to actually forgive the loan entirely. So it actually turned into a grant contribution. So they felt like there was a need for that balance. So they had 3 different pieces of funding from Victoria. They're considering that again this year. We haven't got confirmation from any of the other municipalities because they're all in the same sort of timing as you guys for a budget, but requests are out. Oak Bay also has said they'd like to to contribute their fair share. They did contribute last year, but they'd like to contribute a little bit more this year to be proportionate to the other municipalities.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just guess I can ask my questions now. So how much have we contributed in the past year? You're asking 30, what were we contributing before?
So as I mentioned earlier, the contribution that Colwood has made is through staff time. That's been part of our core budgets. We haven't assigned funding per se. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
It did come before council last year. And at that time, council asked for staff to bring back some details. And so here we are. And luckily we have the data that was collected through 2022 to present to council to show the results.
Okay, great. Second question then, is there going to be is there a cap? Because from what I understand from the rent bank, it's a loan, right? And you negotiate when you can pay it back, when they can afford it. Understandable, really understand it. So it's a loan. So does this bank just go to infinity, or is there a cap? What's the plan?
Thank you. There is a cap. We have on our website, there's a clear set of protocols for what makes a household eligible. Usually the cap's around $3,000. The average seems to be closer to 2,100 depending on the municipality. So it really ranges depending. Sometimes the household just needs a little bit of money to pay off some, maybe their hydro bills in arrears, so it can be quite small or it can be quite significant. And we really have room for that range because we really customize the supports to the household. We'll also give basic needs, sort of grocery cards and other types of help. So it depends on the household, but
Yeah,
there is a cap.
I actually asked the question incorrectly. I understood your cap to the 3,000, but is there a cap that you're gonna, like over the next 4 years, $30,000 a year is 120,000? Is there like a maximum cap that you need in this bank, or?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to know as the housing, as affordability for households, as costs go up and rent prices go up, we really don't know what that need's going to look like going forward. So I think that annual reporting back to you, if we promote this within Colwood and there isn't that much need, then the next fiscal, we would say, okay, the loan fund still has money in it. So we might not need as much, or the loan funds are all gone and it's been subsidized by other parts of the program, maybe if there's more need. So we really don't know. This is a guess, but I think that's something where we can have an ongoing conversation around what that need is.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, do you have a standard formula on how, like, I know we contribute to a lot of things that we go together with other municipalities. They always have magic formulas, either population or property assessment value or property assessment value and population. There's always a magic formula. So we can stand in front of our own taxpayers and say, hey, we're all treated equally. So not one municipality is being treated differently than the other. So I guess my question is, do you have that one formula that you'd apply to each of the municipalities?
Because this is just coming out of the pilot phase and we're just developing these relationships right now, we're really open to that conversation. Certainly right now, the ones where there's a significant portion more, a greater portion of participants like City of Victoria are carrying a heavier load in the cost share right now. And I guess the question will be, is it relative to use of the program, or is it by population? Or is there another metric that folks feel is appropriate? So that's something where right now it's somewhat in proportion to the use of the program, but that's changed. Last year, the City of Victoria was almost 50%, whereas now Saanich and Langford have a lot more. So I think as people become more aware of the program in municipalities, or as that housing squeeze starts to spread out into places like Colwood, we're starting to see more need. So that's something that I think it would be interesting to explore with you as the program evolves, is what's the most appropriate cost share. But right now it is proportionately higher for the places that are using, where there's higher use of the program.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Diane. Councillor Day?
Sorry, I just thought of one quick question that I think is important, because we're all kind of trying to adjust to the new normal, both with the inflation at the grocery store, but also I see a lot of people who are stressing a great deal over mortgage renewals. Do you assist people who have this sort of blip with a mortgage, or is this strictly for renters?
Right now, the program is designed for folks that are renters. The one way that it does help folks with mortgages is if sometimes people really need that tenant income to cover their mortgage. And so where tenants go into arrears through a crisis, then we can help that landlord keep their mortgage payments going. So we definitely do make payments to individual homeowners where there's a tenancy where they're at risk. So that's the only way we do at this point help mortgage holders.
And your advocacy, is that available to both homeowners and renters? Like your credit?
Yeah, I don't think, if somebody comes into our program and isn't eligible for our funding, we always help them to find the avenues for funding and supports, the financial literacy, the credit or financial supports in other ways. So our team definitely, it doesn't, and we found we've been doing a survey of the households coming in, and 50% of them are not yet connected to other service providers, which is a really important thing to know. I always thought that these are households that aren't already connected because they're not normally in crisis. So suddenly they're calling us and saying, I've never been here before. I've never had to ask for help. Can you help? And so we're off for 50% or more, we're the first to call, and we'll always help them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, no, you're good. I'll go back to you, Councillor Jensen. The motion.
Thank you, Worship, and I'm happy to endorse this request. And I do think that's a very suitable application of our funds in this regard. Thank you.
Good seconder, Councillor Day. Any other discussion on this? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Simple. Next. It's we're 2023 grant and aid. Kathy, over to you.
Thank you. Sorry. So the purpose of this report is to summarize the applications and outcome of the staff facilitated council adjudication process for the 2023 grant and aid program, and to seek council direction on what grant amounts to award to the 2023 applicants. For background, annually the city awards grant and aid funding to eligible organizations in accordance with the city's grant and aid policy. Staff followed the adjudication process endorsed by council for this and previous years. Staff compiled the information from the applications and provided each member of council with a summary of the requested grants, along with copies of the individual grant applications in January. Individual members of council provided feedback on the amounts they would like to award to each organization, and staff then took that information and calculated an average recommended grant for each organization, provided that at least 4 members of council supported giving a grant to that organization. The city received 21 applications in November 2022 for organizations requesting funding in 2023. Of the 21 applications received, there were 2 applications that did not receive support from the majority of council, and as such are excluded from the 2023 grant and aid staff recommendation. If council resolves the recommendation before you tonight, that would award 39,700 of the 45,100 approved budget for 2023 from the 2022 to 2026 financial plan for grants and aid, and that would leave 5,400 for off-cycle grant applications in the coming year. That concludes my summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I seeing none, I'm just going to ask a quick couple of questions here. Just one question. I thought there was a rule that we didn't supply money to schools. Was I dreaming that? I thought we didn't do money to schools for some strange reason.
I don't see the schools excluded specifically in our policy or procedure.
Okay.
There is language about nonprofits, although most schools also have a charitable or a nonprofit standing as well. So nothing that I read in our policy or practice excludes schools specifically.
Thank you for clarifying that. Like I could understand the high school dry grad is a social thing, right? To do. Wasn't too sure about the other ones, but okay, thank you for clarifying that. So, Councillor Jensen.
Just to try and add some clarity to your question, Your Worship, I remember having the discussion. I believe it was specific to certain requests that could have been interpreted as being the realm of the provincial government, as opposed to specifics or like the outdoor kindergarten event or program. It was more general than that, because I see what you mean. I mean, we are supporting certain school events, but they're generally specific events or specific programs, not so much related to the actual school curriculum.
Okay. Oh, majority you feel that way? That's good. I'm okay with this. Okay, Councillor Day.
Sorry, I was just going to give you a little more on the history of grants. Once upon a time, Colwood had a no grants policy. And then slowly that changed over years as we realized that there are benefits to providing nonprofits, community groups with money to do social activities. Schools were more of a consideration when particular school sites came forward looking for the city to provide play structures, etc. So it's been a careful dance, I think that would be fair to say, over the years, so that we kind of try to stay in our lanes, but support our community, knowing that our community uses these school sites.
Fair enough. I'm convinced. Just I do have one other question, and it has to do with at one time I remember the city of Colwood. When I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, and they used to give us 12,000 or 15,000 way back when, and we had to every year, because we were over that threshold of $10,000, we had to come in and tell City Council how we spent it. Have we dropped that requirement now? Because I know we have these standing grants that we give out right now to Chambers of Commerce and Green Team, like that's pretty self-explanatory, but we never hear from any of these ones that we give these monies out to, how they're spending our money.
Thank
Just
you,
a
Mayor.
question I have.
There is a requirement that they publicly acknowledge receipt of the funds, and I know there was reference to previously in the past that they needed to say how they use the funds. That was not on this year's application. So I think the answer is that was not a requirement this year.
Okay, thank you. I know you smiled at each other there, so I thought, oh, I just hit a trigger here. Okay, that's great. At this point in time, no other questions. Look for a motion to for the recommendation. Councillor Grove and Councillor Olson seconds it. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. 10.4. Desiree Gibbons, you're going to talk to us about the development services application fee review.
Thank you, Mayor. And good evening, Council. I don't have a presentation prepared for you tonight, but the next item in your agenda is an update to the fees and charges for development applications. We are here tonight before you because the previous council had directed staff to make recommendations for adjustments to fees and charges on an annual basis. Currently, the fees and charges associated with processing development applications lives in 3 different bylaws. This includes the Land Use Application Procedures Bylaw, the Subdivision and Development Bylaw, and the Sign Bylaw. Staff are recommending increases to all established fees in these bylaws to adjust for inflation or to ensure that the fee reflects actual processing and review times. We're also recommending that new fees be introduced for requests that staff have received in the past, but that do not have a fee associated with them. And the amount for these new fees were calculated by multiplying the amount of time required to process the request by the average staff wages. Lastly, we're recommending that all fees in these 3 different bylaws be consolidated and moved into the city's fees and charges bylaw. This will help streamline future fee reviews and updates as all the fees will be located in one place. So the recommendation before you tonight is that council approve the proposed fee increases. Council also has the option to defer the adjustments to fees to a future date and request further information, or to take no action at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Desiree. Questions, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Desiree. Just a quick question. In reviewing all the fees line by line, generally I could see, you know, the comparison, sorry, to CRD municipalities. I went through line by line, and there's a pattern that emerges, you know, where we find a balance, particularly with our West Shore neighbors. The only ones that jumped out at me, the development permit amendment to whereby they're looking to increase floor space on commercial by greater than 10%. That's jumped from 0 to 6,044. And, you know, the comparables there are $100, $800, and so on. You know, I look at Langford, for example, is one of the most expensive at $1,800. Some of them, nothing. The only outlier being Saanich, which is an exorbitant amount. But that was one that I really couldn't kind of get my head around. The other was the strata conversion fee, which again, unlike all of the others, it's a bit of an anomaly. It's you know, it's a real outlier in terms of its number versus the others. So I was just hoping for an explanation on those 2, just to make sure that we're not you know, out of the ballpark, I think.
Desiree.
Thank you, Councillor Ward, and through the chair. I'd like to defer this question to Jasmine. If you're there, Jasmine. I believe the development permit amendment. Oh, I'll allow you to explain. Thank you, Jess.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ward. So the strata conversion fee it is very difficult to do a strata conversion of an existing build. It is a very rare application that it will be, yeah, generally speaking, when someone approaches to have that conversation, we send them to look at the building code and have a discussion with our building department to understand what type of upgrades they are looking at to bring a building up to code to today's standards. And that ultimately negates any effort to try and look further into that endeavor. A strata conversion is also a council becomes the approving officer. So it has to be authorized by council to convert an existing strata. So it's generally one of those applications that is rare to see once people consider all that it would take to take those steps is unlikely to materialize. Then the other question was about DP amendments, right? So I believe the structure that we are currently wishing to pursue is a 50%. We want to do amendments at a 50% rate of the new. So our current development permit fee would be 50% of that fee to amend that development permit. So a person, an applicant can do minor amendments to the development permit that don't affect much of the intent without an application and just working through staff for minor amendments. But a revision to the whole concept that requires a new submission, that effectively is a new application that needs to be referred and go through the same careful review process. Because we recognize that there's an existing application and it's a revision, we want to do a 50% accounting of that effort, but ultimately if the revision is that large, it requires the whole process to begin yet again.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. No, I just wanted to understand the methodology, and that makes sense. So thank you for that.
Councillor Jensen.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. That was part of my question. I think partially covered by Councillor Ward, but I take it this has been carefully scrutinized against our neighboring municipalities, and we're just keeping up with the Joneses kind of deal.
Yeah, so we had a long debates internally about how do we use comparatives against other municipalities. It's all with a grain of salt. The way in which we look at applications, some municipalities offer a different type of package for a review and an application. The city of Langford, that is probably our closest comparable, their subdivision, they have kind of fees for drawing review, meeting with the engineering department. They have quite a broken down effort to quantify and assign a fee to every element and piece that goes into the review. Whereas we may have a base fee that is larger, but it includes pre-application meetings and there's various series of reviews and conversations that happen as part of that initial application. So it's also about the quantity and complexity of applications that are received. As you can imagine, some municipalities don't see a volume of subdivision that some others would. And I think the rates and the fees reflect kind of the volumes as well, or how often do people approach and proposal or application.
That's great, thank you. The only thing that I noted on here was the public notice fee. We went from 0 to 1,750. Was that an area where we'd missed, or that we?
So I believe we had, like, our public hearing fee was $2,000 or $2,200 for a rezoning. What we didn't have accounted for was the newspaper ads and all of those notification costs. So our public hearing fee was $2,200, and that is just to, as you can imagine, the notifications, the mail outs, and then having staff run a dedicated meeting to collect that input has a cost. And we're just trying to split the public hearing and add a notification fee.
Good, thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wonder, when the discussion was going about the strata conversion, I wonder if you could please define that, because I'm not sure that we're all thinking of the same thing.
Yeah, so the most typical I would say discussion that we have would be for a duplex. So a duplex that is not strata title, so is one property owner that owns both sides of the home. And they would like to convert it so they can sell one half and retain the other half. So that is a strata conversion application where council becomes the approving officer, and then the Land Title Act stipulates the type of considerations that council can look at when making the determination if you want to support taking a dwelling unit out of the rental stock effectively to turn it into a ownership unit. But to be able to do that, you must meet the regulations of today's time. So if you can imagine that duplex, if it's not already strata title, it was likely built in the 60s or even predating the 60s, because most duplexes currently are strata title. Even if a person owns both sides, they would have been created as a strata. But older duplexes, then they would be required to upgrade both units to meet today's standards. And as you can imagine, with the step code and the energy requirements, that becomes often cost prohibited. So it's often a desire and an inquiry that doesn't result in an actual application. And same, there are apartment buildings from the 60s probably that are not strata title, but to convert that type of build, you can imagine what that would take in terms of meeting the building code of today. So it becomes quite difficult. I've fielded many questions about this process, but never seen a successful application to strata title.
So I have seen the city probably quite a few years ago now do quite a few conversions of duplexes. So I have seen that come through in the past. Mind you, I think there's been a lot of changes to the building code since those were on our agendas. The other part was the development permit amendment being 50% of the original development permit application fee. And I'm just concerned with that word original. Because we're updating our permit fees here, if there's an amendment to a development permit that comes through, I didn't want to see us be kind of in limbo between the old fee that was paid versus the new fee now. So would it be reasonable to take out the 50% of the original, so striking the word original and just call it 50% of the development permit application fee? Or is there a reason that you've kept original in?
No, I think it makes a lot more sense if we remove original.
Okay, thank you.
Great pickup, Councillor Dave. Give you one. And I have one question right now, Jen. It's out of more of interest. When you talk about recovery of costs, you know, the people working on it again, and it's important to me to understand this. Is that a burden cost, or is it just the straight cost of the people in planning or engineering? Is it burdened?
Sorry, are you saying burden?
Yeah. Do you put the overhead onto it then?
No, this is a great question. So in general, no, we're
Why?
not. So we're applying estimated considerations. But really, when we're looking at cost recovery, we're looking at the direct costs associated.
Interesting. I'd go after the burden if I were you, because it's everything else that happens at the same time, right? It's still administrative support, IT support, right? So, and it's, you know, and I'm not trying to gouge here either. It's just it's logic to me.
There is certainly a balance, but yes, there is an expectation that these fees are recovering both the direct and the indirect costs. But these analyses, for the most part, we're looking at the direct costs associated.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to change that. Okay. Oops, Councillor Day. One more time.
Thank you. I am just going to move the recommendation with that one change of removing the word original from the new fee for the development permit amendment.
Sorry.
Jensen was seconding it.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Jensen seconds. Can we just do this, or should we write it up right there in the recommendation? Yes. I will call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. 10.5, 468 Goldstream Avenue Development Agreement Amendment. Yasmin.
Thank you through the chair. Tonight, I don't have a presentation per se, but I would like to walk you through how I came to the decision to bring this forward to council for consideration. So back in November of last year, I was presented with plans for park dedication for this property. And as a approving officer, I am responsible for accepting park dedication and executing the documents with the signature of the mayor, myself, and the corporate officers. When we were reviewing the park dedication, we met with the Parks Department, Engineering Department to make sure that we're establishing the terms under which we will take possession of park and what would make sense in terms of access, maintenance, and whatever we need to be able to service and adequately accept parkland. And it became clear from those internal discussions that the location of this parkland and the terrain and topography of this parkland would make it increasingly difficult for maintenance and would add the liability of tree maintenance and hazard tree removal and maintenance that is being posed by the adjacency to residential. So while we do have steeply sloped terrain and parkland, it generally is further enough from residential properties to the point that it minimizes the amount of hazard management that needs to happen on those lands. This particular terrain is in close adjacency to properties in the city of Langford, as well as this new 6-story building would become another target, if you will, for potential tree management and removal or active management of a forest. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan that Council endorsed back in 2021 outlines the type of parkland that should be prioritized as we look for park dedication throughout the city. And while there is value in the environmental conservation of ecosystem and riparian areas, we are looking at properties and land that is easily accessible not necessarily by the public, but even for staff to maintain and monitor. And ultimately at this location, it would be likely the most adjacent neighbors, which would be the strata owners of this apartment building, that would be the most appropriate stewards of that asset and land. The property, because of its steep slope, is a 40% grade from the northern east corner of the lot to kind of where the proposed park dedication begins. It's a 40% grade. There is almost no flat land, unlike the adjacent park on Gambier Park, that has actually a plateau and an usable portion of the lands that is used and visited by people from the neighborhood. This particular terrain at the back of a strata, you would need to be entering a strata property, go around a strata building to the back to then access what would be a pretty steep terrain. Closing it off to the public, we would need to have some monitoring of how the strata owners may or may not use that space. And if we were to have a conservation covenant on it, we could allow private property owners of the strata to become stewards of the land and be partners in maintaining a natural asset through the community. So I think it's more of a philosophical opportunity for us to decide whether is the city responsible for protecting and taking on every environmental asset, or could we look at partnerships and opportunities for stewarding happening from private property owners? When we come forward for rezonings, not every environmental asset is protected through park dedication, and we often propose a covenant instead when the dedication or the area of protection is located in such a way that a building is kind of blocking or taking precedent over the environmental asset. And it makes sense that a strata is responsible for monitoring and managing the environmental piece. We think that an environmental covenant can also offer some education for those strata owners as to what is the asset that they are responsible for. It's not just a set of prohibitions, but also a bit of an education as to the values of those steep slopes and riparian elements. So we're just here seeking council direction. The property owner is willing and able to meet the terms of the development agreement. So if council wishes to proceed with park dedication, we'll sign the documents and accept the park. But they are also willing to work with us and do a covenant instead of park dedication, if that's how council would like to proceed.
Open it up for questions from council. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So this is a very significant site in Colwood, in that this is the site of the Dairy and Cheese House, which is the arguably possibly the oldest building in Victoria that's still standing. And it also is true that when you look at the map showing the riparian area, that half of the property is in the riparian area. So the building towards the northerly side of the property is actually within the riparian area setback. So the corner of the foundation of the building is over the line, and it was at the time that this was looked at initially. And it's definitely problematic in that it is a very, very steep north-facing slope, but at the bottom of that slope is a wetland creek, And there is a portion on the easterly side of that portion that is fairly flat. It's the part right up against the back of the building that's the steepest. So I'm just concerned because once upon a time, I thought Section 219 covenants were the answer, but they have been less than perfect at actually realizing environmental benefits. So I'm just wondering how we could be assured that those trees would actually be retained and that the riparian setback would be respected.
So the riparian element, so there is the draft covenant that is included with the staff report includes the environmental impact assessment and the riparian area report that outlines the location of the SPIA, so the stream site protection area, which is the buffer or the area within which the province does not allow any development to encroach within. And I do not believe that the proposal extends into that area at all, but there is a map and the assessment included in that draft covenant. With respect to how effective are covenants at achieving the environmental protection, so any destruction of a riparian element or interference with a riparian protection area is an infraction through the provincial Riparian Act. So it can be pursued by the province as well as through us, through our fine. Any removal of a protected tree within a covenant area has a fine of $10,000 for tree removal that has taken place without a tree management permit. So we do have that to pursue compensation. I guess once the tree is cut, there is no gaining it back, but at least we have avenues to pursue in terms of enforcement through our bylaw enforcement arm, and that provincial government can also pursue compliance through their own fulfillment of the Riparian Act. The steepness of the terrain renders the maintenance of these forests and vegetation very important to achieve that stability of that terrain, and that is spoken about in the geotechnical report. So it is in the best interest of a strata or a property owner to retain and maintain the tree canopy and the understory of that terrain in terms of geotechnical stability. Like the vegetation is providing value beyond ecosystem, but also stability.
Right, but how would we know? So you're proposing a
Mhm.
Section 219 covenant on an area that we have no access to, and we're not attempting to provide access to. And it was the report that you provided is from 2011. So you don't even know that what's in that report is still existing on the site.
So the draft covenant included with the staff report includes a requirement for a statutory right-of-way. So it's a blanket statutory right-of-way that allows city staff to walk the site to confirm that the terms of the covenant are maintained. So we do have a statutory right-of-way to enter the premises at any point in time. The gate that is a requirement as part of the development permit. It's a recommendation by the qualified environmental professional, and it has a gate for access. One of the tricky parts or challenges is that the access is not adequate for maintenance, like park maintenance stuff, because it's a sidewalk. It's the sidewalk that is adjacent to the building on the side yard of the development, but it is more than adequate for staff to enter and monitor at any given point if we hear that there is activity taking place that is not consistent with the terms of the covenant. We do have the legal right to enter under the terms of the draft conservation covenant. So it's a conservation covenant with a statutory right of way for entering to monitor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Jasmine. This is interesting, an interesting discussion, and I did have a few questions. One during the report is, I think, along the same lines of what Councillor Day was indicating. You know, who supervises or regulates what's going on in this area if it's not on our roster for, you know, regular inspections as a park? I mean, is it simply complaint driven, like you just said? If we heard something is going on there, we would go and have a look? Or if we go this route with a section 219 covenant, does that mean there's some accountability from the Parks Department to be eyes onto this property on a regular basis?
I would say the opposite. I would say if we take it on as park, then we should be monitoring what activities taking place on those spaces, because we are ultimately the holders of that land. But if it's a covenanted area, I guarantee the strata property owners will have keen eyes to monitor the activity that is taking place in their backyard. It is likely that the use of that space will be pretty limited to people that live in those buildings, just because if these properties, steeply sloping, was located with clear public access on a street, it would be different, like Ambier Park, a few lots over, because then the public is welcome. It is a welcoming park that has an access off of the street. But the likelihood of people feeling welcome to enter through strata property all the way to the back to utilize a park, even as passive recreation, just to walk a dog or just take in nature, as steep as it is, the occasional access by the public, maybe.
Jasmine, are there other examples of this specific occurrence within the community, and what has the result been? Or is this a one-off?
So we have conservation covenants throughout Colwood. So we have one on Sun Heights, Claudette Court, the Sun Heights. There's a conservation covenant along there where tree removal that needs to take place needs to come through the Development Services Department to assess a hazard, and then we need an arborist report saying what is that tree sick, disease, or posing a hazard to a home, and therefore the removal gets okayed. And it's we often go for a modification of the tree as opposed to an outright removal. As I said, I think because of the conditions of this site are such that they provide not only an environmental benefit, but a slope stability. I think there is a vested interest in the property owner to retain that value, not beyond ecology, and for the services that it provides to stabilize the rear portion of the lands.
And help me out, because I don't remember, but is that building going to be owner occupied and then stratified, or is it a rental building? Because I think there's a dramatic difference in the approach that might be taken.
Yeah, so these is three different buildings, 194 units, and they are condominiums, my understanding.
So there is a strata that will be accountable, and I mean, as long as the interests of the community are protected, my 2 cents, you know, as long as we have some levers to pull, I take it we're gonna, I think I heard you say, and I'm sorry, I didn't read through the whole 98-page document there, but we're still gonna have right of access through to that property either way for our staff members?
Yes.
I'm satisfied that this, you know, should serve the interests of our community worship. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, before I go to Councillor Grove, Gord, I think your hand was up. You've got some insight for us, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just gonna add with the maintenance and inspections, even if this park, or this was a park, more unlikely like a nature park or an undeveloped park where there's not any infrastructure, it would be complaint based as well. We wouldn't be doing regular inspections to this type of a park. Just to add that to the conversation.
Thank you very much for that input. Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mayor. The question I have is actually about the small park at the street with the Colwood Dairy Shed, as it's titled here, the Dairy Shed. Anyhow, it gets moved, I understand, to that site, and that it becomes a city park.
Yes.
Which would be like a community park or a neighborhood park.
Exactly. And so the dairy building would be relocated closer to Goldstream. And that is the type of, that is a good park that has a street access that is visible from the street, that has adjacent parking spaces that are allocated as part of the development. There will be, I can't remember the allocation, but a number of parking stalls that will be dedicated for that dairy building park with a few benches, and it will be providing the service of a small neighborhood park for access and enjoyment of the community, whereas the lands at the back of the third building, as I said, they are serving an environmental and stabilizing, provide value, but we can retain that value through a covenant, knowing that the property owners would have to be vested in retaining that stability of the bank.
Right, and I understand the value, I think, to the city of doing that. We are taking on the cost of doing something with that building, whether it's a museum or that's not the commercial property they're talking about in the proposal here, though, is it?
And no, so there's some commercial space on the ground floor of the buildings, but then the dairy building is going to be a heritage designated asset, and access to the building, interior of the building will be determined after the move and see what is the structural, that will be Byron's effort there to determine what is the safety of an occupancy inside that building once it's moved.
Yeah, and I have lots of questions about the use of the streetscape in this particular proposal, but I know that's for another time, if ever. But I understand the park that is you're talking about. I appreciate the fact that its geotechnical value, that the trees are in place, etc., is probably the thing that will save the trees and that site in a natural state. I think I would base my support upon the fact that I believe that's to be true. Let's hope so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Day.
Sorry, just one last question, and it's in regard to the dairy and cheese house. We had extensive reports on the dairy and cheese house because it has some intact characteristics, I guess is the best word for it. The way the bricks are laid in the floor is very specific, and it's the old style of building that allowed the way that it was built to keep the dairy products cold and allow for the draining away of liquids that were draining from the cheese as it was making. And it's a big undertaking to take that from where it is currently located on the site near well, basically going to be covered over by where the first building closest to Goldstream Avenue is located. And moving it to the new place is particularly difficult because the walls are 18-inch thick stone walls, maybe even thicker. And I just want to be assured that we are going to be ensuring that its integrity remains intact when it is moved, and that there won't be any complaining about the costs of moving the building, or that those are promises that were made to the city of Colwood back in 2011 when this development proposal was brought forward, that they would put the buildings in a better place, they would put the cheese house in a better place, and it would be retained for the community. Is that still all true?
So maybe I'll let Iain speak to the specifics of the dairy building move on relocation, but what I will add is that now we are actively working on a building permit submission. So we are actually trying to actualize the build and identified what the conditions that must be met before we issue this building permit application. So one of those conditions is the relocation of the dairy building, as well as providing a security deposit to ensure that we can see that through and complete it if we need to intervene at any point to see it out to completion. And the applicant has engaged a heritage consultant, and Iain Bourhill and his team have actively been working to support that effort of the heritage move. So, but he has probably more details than me on that piece.
Could I rein this in a little bit here? Maybe this is a conversation that should be taken offline here, mainly because we are talking about the amendment to the development agreement, which is going off topic a little bit. I mean, which is okay. It's all good stuff that should be addressed. There's no doubt about it. But I'd like to get back to the actual what the topic is and the recommendation, which is the development agreement amendment. Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Well, it affects how I'll vote.
Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendation, Your Worship, and I do. I mean, this wasn't about the cheese house, and I mean, we spent many hours in the last term talking about the cheese house. And I think a lot of work was done on that, and there were significant commitments that were made. I'm sure that Mr. Bourhill can confirm some of that, but I'm happy to move the recommendation before us, Your Worship. Thank you.
Seconder. Councillor Grove. Discussion. Councillor Ward.
With respect to Councillor Jansen and yourself, Mr. Mayor, I'm aware of the Colwood Cheese House and have some insight into the history of it, and and I think it's very relevant. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd hate to see it move from its location at all, but the world isn't perfect. It's privately owned land, and we have to embrace it. But well, when I say you, I say Mr. Mayor, Councillor Jansen, Councillor Day, you all have the benefit of having some past discussion on it. And while that past discussion may or may not have happened, I wasn't privy to it. So I would prefer to understand what efforts are going to be made to preserve this building, because it does affect how I vote. And on a secondary piece to that, I am a little concerned with the building footprint at the back end, and what will happen essentially if you read the tree report, the arborist report, the trees all along the top slope of the bank will have to be taken down, which in turn will create some instability. The arborist kind of suggests that you could see some significant impact from that, which may drastically alter the slope there. So I don't love the building footprint, I'll be honest with you. Everybody always wants to build bigger, build more. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right build. So I'm by no means ready to just put my hand up and vote yes on this. I'd like to hear from Mr. Bourhill if that's okay with the rest of the council.
Mr. Bourhill.
Thank you, Worship. So I'll start by reminding council that this property is actually subject to a heritage conservation bylaw. So it's our second property in Colwood after the Colwood Pioneer Church that has that status. And within that bylaw, it stipulates what exactly has to happen to the Colwood Dairy and Cheese House. So not only is there a section 219 covenant that came about as the rezoning, there's also that bylaw that's applied. So as the Director of Development Services mentioned, we are working with the applicant to meet the terms of the agreement with the city with respect to the treatment of that structure. It has been characterized as one of the most significant pieces of agricultural heritage west of Winnipeg in terms of the settler heritage in this area, and representative of really the first agricultural industrial activity with the settler community in Colwood and Victoria. So there is a lot of importance in this, and we're working really hard with the applicant. They had a restoration plan submitted and accepted by the city several years ago. Unfortunately, the consultants that drafted that restoration plan are no longer available to carry it out. Therefore, the developers have had to find another consultant, a qualified heritage consultant to carry out the work. And heritage consultants are a lot like architects. You know, generally speaking, a heritage consultant will look at a challenge or a project and come up with their own set of recommended actions to carry it out. So that's the case we're looking at here, where another heritage consultant is working through a new proposal for the restoration plan. And that is a requirement prior to the building permit issuance. In addition to that restoration plan, there's also a security deposit in the amount of 110% of the relocation and restoration of the Colwood Dairy and Cheese House. So that is another requirement prior to the issuance of building permit. Happy to answer any other questions about that project.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. Is there any new information about the slope stability and the what will happen with the existing mature trees?
So the building footprint stops 3 minutes. So there is so if you look at the site plan, and I believe it's also included, perhaps as part of the development permit that is publicly available on the website, but the development permit that has been approved for this site includes a 3-meter construction buffer area. So the underground parkade and the foundation of this building is at a minimum at any given point 3 meters away from the boundary of this proposed park dedication. That is not at the edge of the steepest slope, but it is at the boundary of what the proposed park dedication would be. So if even to the property line between the building foundation and the proposed park boundary, there is a minimum of 3 meters to allow for construction activity to take place within that space. So I do not believe, I'm not entirely sure what plans you are looking at that are potentially misconstruing the location of the building footprint with respect to these line of dedication or the environmentally sensitive lands that lay at the back of the property.
It's the riparian setback.
So the riparian setback is well within that park dedication area. So I'm not, so there's no, I mean, the province would not allow an encroachment of a building into that riparian area. So the building, to my understanding, my read of the building permits and the development permits, there is no riparian area impacted by the location of the building footprint.
One of these attachments shows it in green for half of the site. So that's what I was basing it on.
Maybe that is the development permit area. So our mapping program, how we designate environmentally sensitive lands and hazard lands, is a very pixelated map that applies kind of a general buffer of if you are located near Colwood Creek or a creek or water body, then we apply a very wide, generous buffer to create these development permit area maps. So it's the land use designation. It's a super broad stroke to try and identify properties that would be subject to additional reporting. And then it's through an environmental impact assessment and a riparian area report that we then narrow down the scope of that environmentally sensitive land.
So when this originally came forward and the plans were large size, much more detailed than what I can see on my iPad here, it was very clear that the edge of the foundation was within the riparian area. Maybe it was changed. I don't know. I don't have the advantage of being able to look at that, but it certainly doesn't sound to me as though the existing trees on the site are being retained or protected.
Much like Councillor Ward indicated, so the arborist report, so the arborist report does speak to once you start cutting into a forest, then the trees become weaker, the ones that are behind or adjacent. So regardless of whether it was going to be park or not, there was going to need to be management of those trees that become weaker as the construction kind of takes progress. And then there is further assessment of the tree hazard once the building is located. So a forest is no hazard to anybody if nobody has access and if there's no building in close proximity to it. The trees become hazardous when you add buildings and structures in their proximity. And so the active management of that slope and terrain, there's very clear recommendation as to what it would require: tree planting, enhancement to make sure that the slope continues to be stable. So we would work with that intent and to enforce that covenant aspect, which is include like all of those reports and studies and recommendations by professionals. We will continue to work with the applicant to stay true.
Right, but there's no consideration of not building where the tree is, right? That's not on the table.
No, that was part of the rezoning, kind of the rezoning enabled these bill form, if you wish, to take place at this location.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. So we have a mover and a seconder of the recommendation. No other questions, discussion. I'll call the question. Well, I do have one. Sorry. Sorry, Jasmine, I did have a question. So can I ask you a simple question here? Who requested this? Was it us or was it the developer?
I requested it. So after meeting with the Parks Department and the Engineering Department and seeing what difficulties we were going to have to access a park through a sidewalk next to a building, and the logistical challenges that pose, and the fact that the building is enabled through a rezoning and renegotiating wider access for even a parking space for guards staff to park near the gate. It was no longer in the question, right? Like they meet the parking requirements for a residential building, but perhaps not the accommodations that we would need to even come close to tree removal or of addressing any of the hazards and potential maintenance elements that we would ask of any other park, where we could have a staging area and be able to park and locate in proximity to that.
Well, I remember all these conversations happening. I remember a lot of this, and my big thing, and I didn't remember that going into the riparian area, to tell you the truth. That wasn't the issue. To me, it was the number of trees that had to come down. That was my concern at the time, to tell you the truth. And then there was the traffic flow and how it was moving in and out. All the questions were answered, and I think the majority of council had voted for it. It's just, and it's unfortunate now because, a simple change like this has caused us to relook at the whole thing again, which has already been approved. And this is what makes it very difficult right now.
10 years.
Yeah. So I wasn't around then. I wasn't born then. So anyways, yeah, so I was just curious about that. And I guess the only other thing that the one thing that you made me happy about is, we have a statutory right of way, because I could tell you our strata is the same thing. It's the city has a right of way, and they can come in any time, and because we're in a riparian area ourselves. And I know that, we look after it very, very well. So a bit of arguments about trees coming down and which ones stay up, and they say that one stays up and it falls down, and on and on and on like this. So, so I guess from my own personal experience, just only in my strata, and that's all, I'll put the caveat on this, it's worked out okay. But I guess what really bothered me a little bit is that a statement made by Councillor Day, the enforceability of the Section 219s. That's a bit scary to me. I didn't realize that. I'm just sitting there, I was a bit dumbfounded by it. And I don't know how true that is. Are they enforceable or not enforceable?
So to enforce a Section 219 covenant, we have to go through court. So we have to go to the court system to enforce a legal document registered on title. That said, we now have fines that are pretty hefty for the removal of trees without a permit or an okay by the city. So we can pursue that actively, and I think it is enough of a deterrent. As I said, like there will be a lot of tree management and removal happening once the lands are cleared to accommodate the building footprint. And then we will look to the applicant to actively reforest that space to ensure the stability of the soil. And there is ample professional advice in those documents to guide them through what needs to happen to keep the slope stable.
So if I'm just going to get to the root of this right now for me, how I'm going to conclude here. It's in this case, we're asking, we are asking for the removal of the requirement for park dedication. Rather, we want access to park dedication area. That's the difference right now. And so from what I can see, the advantages for us are perhaps long-term maintenance costs. Am I correct? Right.
And, yeah, liability and maintenance cost over the long term.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to know. And so if we were to do this and have a park, see, I think they're getting something out of this that I try to tip the scales. This is a balance here right now. In one sense, we are getting some advantages because we don't have that ongoing long-term cost. But on the other hand, they're getting the advantage too right now because they don't have to do a park dedication. They just are providing access to park dedicated area. So their costs are way less, right? So you think that they could maybe offset it with something else? I don't know.
So there was never, because this park was going to be a natural park, there was never a requirement for any improvements beyond a gate, like a fence, a 6-foot fence, because it was supposed to be retained in its natural state. So the expectation will remain that the fence is installed. and that they just put signage up for the strata to recognize as a covenant protected area with an environmental value that speaks to riparian and steep slopes.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Day.
I just want everyone to be very clear that these trees are not protected in any way, that I have been informed by staff, any tree permit that's applied for is granted and permitted.
Except for trees located in a riparian area or a covenant, or protected by a covenant. So our current urban forest management bylaw applies to all lands, and it is fairly permissive. However, the Riparian Act is a provincial legislative process, and tree removal in that area, it is prohibited as part of our official community plan guidelines as to how we manage those areas. And then when we have a covenant on title protecting from tree removal, then that supersedes our tree management bylaw requirement, and then we speak to protecting those.
Right, we speak to protecting it, but we don't actually protect it, because under the section 219 covenant, if something happens and we don't like it, we have to bear the costs of going to court to enforce that covenant, and therefore there is no protection.
Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Worship Jasmine. You're getting your steps in.
Okay.
Who owns the property with a section 219 covenant? Who does it belong to?
So it would be the property owner. So the property owner would be the strata. Currently, there's one property owner. So
I appreciate that. And I find myself having made a decision and now waffling a bit, but I just wonder if, Your Worship, if I might orate just a bit, but I just wonder if it comes to the community as a park and we do absorb some minor liability, but at the very least, we're putting eyes onto it occasionally. Ownership changes hands. I take it if it's a park, it's on our roster of parks. Is that right?
if it's a park, it becomes city-owned land. Yes, it's dedicated as park.
I find myself conflicted all of a sudden. I'm not, maybe I'll just hear what others have to say.
Council Ward.
I think there's myriad issues sort of being kicked around, and at the end of the day, I have to remind myself that we're strictly talking about, you know, the covenant versus park here. I didn't want to let Councillor Day's comment about the tree bylaw go by without some acknowledgement. I have serious concerns about our, well, it seems disregard for a tree bylaw in the community. We might as well not have one from what I can tell. So I think that's a comment, you know, or a discussion for another day. But I didn't want to let it go unnoticed or unremarked. In this particular case, I think I'm torn as well. I think I'm straddling that fence, but I am concerned about the cost to Colwood taxpayers. We're not flush with money, contrary to what a lot of people think. And, you know, if there's instability caused by the removal of trees and things with a design that was approved, I'll put it on record by previous council. You know, ultimately, I don't want to incur the costs that come with that. I don't love it. Don't necessarily love much about this proposal at all. Not the covenant, but the overall development. But at the end of the day, I think that removing that liability is where I'll lean. But again, like I said, I didn't want to make that vote without remarking on the very real concerns about the tree bylaw and where it stands right now. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, I will call the question. So it's been the motion that is under the recommendation is what is moved and seconded. May I get all hands in favor of this motion? Okay. And those opposed? Show it as Mayor Kobayashi and Councilor Day. I just have my, yeah, sitting on the fence on this one, I'll tell you, but I feel strongly about this. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We'll get into. Okay, let's get into bylaws. Bylaw numbers 1969 main sewer LAS enlargement bylaw 525 Langholme Drive. Adoption. Mover and seconder, please. Grove and Jensen. All in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Bylaw number 1973 land use application procedure amendment fee update. First, second, and third reading. Mover. Olson. Grove second. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Bylaw number 1974, signed bylaw amendment fee update, first and second.
Sorry, did you do 1, 2, 3 all at once on 1973?
Yes.
Oh, I'm stuck in the old, I just want to make sure the original was removed from the bylaw that we're passing.
Sorry. Councilor Day.
I just want to make sure that bylaw 1973 has that word original removed from the development permit amendment.
Oh,
thank you.
Good point. Yep, good point. Okay, bylaw number 1974, signed bylaw amendment fee update, first, second, and third reading. Mover and seconder, Jensen and Ward. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Bylaw number 1975, Colwood Subdivision and Development Bylaw, fee update, first, second, and third reading. Grove and Ward. All in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous, thank you. And bylaw number 1976, fees and charges amendment schedule EFG, first, second, and third reading. Move, Kate Jensen, Olson, second. All in favor? Any in opposition? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councilor Day moves adjournment. Seconder, Councilor Ward, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much.